All right, welcome to week 25, I actually think it is, of Wednesday Night Live with Pioneer Baptist Church. My name is Pastor Evan Lugo, and I'll be your host tonight, as it has been every single week. So we're going to go through the book of Ruth here in just a minute. Good to see many of you here. Eric, Kelly, the Claytons on Facebook, the Millers, the Mitchells, the Kellys, the Tuckers, the Lugos on YouTube right now. If you are joining us, let us know in the comments. We're glad to have you here with you. I'm reading these comments here, people asking for dramatic music for the countdown. Good to have the hearts here as well. Glad you guys are jumping in. So, funny thing about the music, all right, because I've wondered about this as well. If you have ever watched any of our live streams on Sundays, you know they always have music with us. We use the same program for that. But for some reason, when I run it through my computer in the past, we get warnings all the time about like you're using copyrighted music and all those kinds of things, and like they'll mute, sometimes Facebook will mute it for us, or YouTube will make a note of it, and or say, hey, if you don't stop using this, then the video will stop working, even though we actually have permission. We actually have permission to use this music and those kinds of things. And so sometimes you have to go back in and put it into YouTube that we have permission, and they'll take that away. And sometimes it's actually, believe it or not, a bigger headache than you could imagine. Sometimes to use music. It doesn't always work that way, but sometimes it works that way. And so since it's just a one-man operation here, I thought, man, it's sometimes it can be a big headache. So I'm just not going to do it. So I don't want to have to. It's hard enough for me to keep things running on like normal, or at least somewhat normal. And so it was one last thing. I could maybe next week, since it's the last week we do it this way, I'll sit here in the background and just hum for you. I'll hum some sort of song, or play the harmonica or strum the guitar. So come in a couple minutes early for that next week, since it's the last week, and uh, I'll do that for you guys since it's the last one. But we are glad that you are here, as always. Excited for you to be with us and join in this conversation with us. And so it always works better whenever you guys comment and jump in. I even appreciate the early comments that lead to some conversation. But let's get started tonight. We'll jump right into it and start with the fact of the day. And when I read this, not only was it interesting to me, I also thought it was helpful, especially for guys. Guys, I think this could potentially be a game changer if you didn't know this before. If you did not know this before, this might be a game changer for you. Did you know? Fact of the day. And maybe some of you did. I wouldn't be surprised if some of you knew this. If you knew this, let me know. But I just found out this week, and I found it really interesting, potential game changer for me. Here it is. Ready? Did you know that there are flowers that smell like chocolate, including the chocolate daisy and the chocolate cosmos, what you see right here. So talk about two birds with one stone. If your wife likes chocolate and flowers, boom, right here. Now, I will say, are they safe to eat, and do they taste like chocolate? I don't know. So I'm not, don't ever say, well, Pastor said you could smell those and eat those. I didn't say that. I just said they're flowers that actually smell like chocolate. See, look, see, down below. My wife says those are now her favorite. Those are her new favorites. So now I know what to look for. The Clayton said, that just sounds wrong, right? You expect this, well, I guess chocolate's a sweet smell too, but again, I am not saying eat the flowers. That is not what I said. I did not say they taste like chocolate. I just said there are flowers that, and by the way, the chocolate daisy looks exactly like a daisy. I saw a picture of it. This one here looks like a pretty flower as well. If you mix the two of them, yellow and this kind of reddish color, all in one, boom, there you go. Well, Katie says she doesn't like the smell of chocolate. Well, then they're not for you. Uh, that's true. Eric says if you bring those, you better bring some chocolate, because now she'll want chocolate. Again, who knows though? I just said they smell like chocolate. I didn't say they tasted like chocolate, but I also didn't say they didn't taste like chocolate. So maybe one of you can figure that out for us. Go and find chocolate daisy, chocolate cosmos, wherever you get them from. Ask people if they're poisonous. Just because just because we don't know what they're like. So I'm not saying go get one and just eat it, but somebody out there, if you find out they're safe, maybe you can give it a try. But I thought that was kind of interesting. A flower that both looks like and tastes like chocolate, all in the same one nice package. There you go. Moving on to the question of the day. The question of the day, and this is kind of a question that the answer to it may vary, like kind of depending on how you want to answer it, and that is fine. The one answer you can't give. Okay, I'm eliminating this answer. You cannot say the Bible, and you cannot say a book of the Bible. All right, so those are off the table. We all understand how much we enjoy those, but those answers are off the table. Right, here it is. What is your favorite book? Now, I asked that question, and so you can answer it maybe in one of a couple ways. Maybe you could answer it like your favorite book of all time. Maybe it's your favorite book that you've recently read. Maybe it's a book that you're currently reading that you're really enjoying. But what is your favorite book? George, I literally just said you can't say the Bible or a book in the Bible. Those are the one things you cannot say. You cannot say the Bible or a book in the Bible. So, what is your favorite book? All right, Pilgrim's Progress. Yes, I have read that a couple of times in my lifetime. And George, I said a Bible or a book in the Bible. I literally said both of those things. You can't say either one of them. But Amy chimes in with Pilgrim's Progress, and I enjoy those. Although I will say, George, I'm glad you like the Book of Romans, especially since we're going through it on Sundays. So that is a plus. Pilgrim's Progress, says Amy, which I have enjoyed that as well. That's been a couple times, 2 or 3 times. Kristen says Lord of the Rings, and Kristen, I'm not laughing at your answer. I'm laughing at George right below you who said I wasn't listening. I at least I appreciate you. I appreciate you being honest, George. I appreciate that. Lord of the Rings, I would be surprised is a favorite of a lot of people. I tell people this though too, and I may be in the minority on here. I actually enjoyed reading The Hobbit more than I enjoyed reading Lord of the Rings. But when it comes to the movies, I think Lord of the Rings movies are better than the Hobbit movies. That's my personal opinion. Let's see here. Haynes Repair Manual. Oh man, I don't know about that. So let's see here. Um, let's see. In Nancy Drew books, right? So I know a lot of people that were that way as well. Ladies that enjoyed Nancy Drew books, or like the guys always enjoyed the Hardy Boys, those kinds of things. Heaven by Randy Alcorn. I think Terry, I think you might have been telling me. Oh, maybe it's a different book by Randy Alcorn. I can't remember, but I remember you just telling me something about one of their books. And so let's see here. Let's see. Oh, I'm looking at Facebook here. Fred says Left Behind series. George Eliot's All Creatures Great and Small series. Oh. Eric says Chronicles of Narnia and Unbroken. I agree with both of those. Very, very much so. I remember a couple years ago, Cassie buying me Unbroken for a Christmas present, and I read it before. I think I maybe finished it even before the end of December, and it was really good. Some people are chiming in here as well with Sherlock Holmes, so some other good ones in here as well. So maybe if you're looking for something to read, you can. They all sound good. I see some on here that I'd be interested to see as well and to read as well. So may have to do that. If you have other ones you want to chime in on, Ella's is currently Little Blue Truck. I hear you. I hear you. Cassie was saying when she was young she enjoyed Nancy Drew as well, and so she liked reading those too. So that's good. And so if you have any other ones that come in or that you remember as we continue to go, let us know, and we'd like to let them here. See, okay. Lone Survivor or American Sniper. So yeah, I was trying to think if I had one of those up on my shelf here. That's what I was doing. I was looking at my bookshelf, but I do not see that up there right now. So, yeah, let us know if you have any other ones, David. I remember you telling me you're more of a audio book person, which, by the way, in this day and age, is a great way to take in lots of books if you haven't had a chance to do that. Amy says John Stranger. I'm not familiar with John Stranger. So So maybe I need to become familiar. I'm not sure, but okay. Let us know if you have some more coming in. We'll keep moving here. Today is joke of the day. Now I have a feeling that you'll get this. You guys are so smart. You're so on the ball, um, and especially in this day and age, the question will not be will one of you get it. The question is who's the first one that can. You know what? I'm looking at some of these other ones. So Katie mentions John Stranger as well. David Tucker says Audible is the greatest invention for folks who travel. And then the Hearts mentioned the Count of Monte Cristo. I have heard multiple people in my lifetime mention the Count of Monte Cristo as their favorite book. And I feel like it sounds like an old person talking here. I feel like I read it when I was in high school, but I don't remember. So now that makes me want to go back and read it. But I have heard that from multiple people, how much they enjoyed the Count of Monte Cristo. So there you go. All right, here we go. Joke of the day. Ready? It's not. I don't think it's going to be if somebody will get it. I think it's who will be the first person to get it. Ready? Here we go. Joke of the day. What do you call two monkeys that share an Amazon account? And while I'm waiting for the answer, I'll watch some more. Cassie mentions To Kill a Mockingbird was one that she enjoyed reading as well. The Mitchell, Amy, Katie are chiming in on what the John Stranger books are, so they're giving us an idea, kind of Walker Texas Ranger, old Western Christian times, but Christian things, fictional guys, a preacher, but also a cowboy who catches the bad guys. Okay, sounds cool. I know a lot of people I grew up with, their favorite was Louis L'Amour, who was kind of a Western kind of guy. People really enjoyed those. I did not read them a lot, but I had a lot of friends that enjoyed them. Waiting on the first correct answer, though, for the joke of the day. What do you call two monkeys that share an Amazon account? A bear. George says a barrel of monkeys. No, that's a fun game, though. That is not it. I'll give you guys just a few moments here to chime in. I bet somebody... two toddlers with a phone. I bet it feels very similar to two toddlers with a phone. Let's see here. Okay, so I'm guessing Zane Grey, or maybe those are more books. Daniel on Facebook got it. What do you call two monkeys that share an Amazon account? Primates. Primates. And Terry Cross says broke. That is true as well. That is true. But the correct answer, what do you call two monkeys that share an Amazon account? Primates. Primates. Amazon Prime. Primates. Boom. There you go. So you can share that at some point later on for maybe if you're around the dinner table or at work and you want to kind of break the silence, share some good jokes there. All right. Let's move on to the Book of Ruth, and we're glad you could join us in the Book of Ruth. We've got 2 more weeks, one more chapter 4 in the Book of Ruth, and excited to be sharing it together with you guys. Over the past couple weeks, we kind of looked at Ruth and Boaz's relationship, and we looked at some different ways that their relationship was deepening, and we were learning some ways that we can deepen our relationship with the Lord. And we looked at these 5 ways: preparation, submission, listen to the Lord, receive what the Lord has, and to wait on the Lord. But today, we turn our attention to Ruth chapter 4, the last chapter in the book of Ruth. And if you remember, when we started the book of Ruth basically starts with 3 funerals, right? The funeral of Elimelech and Mahlon and Chilion, his 2 sons. They all 3 of them die, and Moab. And it's an interesting contrast to see, right? Because you have it starting with 3 funerals and ending with a wedding. It starts with loads of sorrow, and it ends with genuine joy. And this book alone, just Ruth chapter 4, serves as a consistent reminder that despite all the hardships and despite all the difficulties, that God is still writing the story, and we don't know how it's going to go. We don't have to fear the future, that just because things look bad in the present, just because things don't look like they're going the way that we would like them to go, wish they could go, doesn't mean that God doesn't have a joyful story and an intended end, and all of those kinds of things, and so we don't want to lose sight of that. We haven't seen the last chapter. We haven't. Well, when ultimately we've seen the last chapter, and ultimately we know what's going to happen, and so that always serves as a great encouragement to our heart. And it's interesting how this idea here ties in with Romans chapter 8 and verse 28, which we'll get to in a couple weeks in the book of Romans. Ultimately, we know that God is good and God will make everything right and everything will be perfect with him. But even in the here and now, we don't know um, all that God is going to write into a story. And so just because things may not be perfect the way, I'll even say this, even though things may stink right now in your life or certain situations, that doesn't mean we have to fear the future as if the future is always going to be awful. But as I was sitting here thinking about this and trying to put myself in Ruth and Naomi's shoes, right at the beginning of the book of Ruth, I'm sure in the midst of their difficulties, in their mind, they started to roll through all of the struggles and all of the issues and all of the hardships that could potentially come from that one hardship of losing their husbands, right? And it made me wonder this question. And I don't ask this because I don't want us to get depressed or downhearted. As a matter of fact, I want us to do the exact opposite today. But just in general, maybe some of these are personal to you, but just in general, what are some things that could cause someone to fear the future? Okay, what are some things you think maybe even in our day and age right now that people fear the future about? And again, so for Naomi, they're going, "Oh my goodness, we've lost our husbands, so we have no way for income. We have nobody to take care of us. We're not going to be able to take care of our property. We're probably going to lose it. We're going to be widows our whole time and be dependent upon other people. And what if somebody isn't there to take care of us? And what if this happens? And what if that happens? And what if we have to end up, becoming bond slaves to somebody just to make ends meet, or what happens if we can't get out of Moab and get back to Bethlehem? There are all of these things that potentially roll through their mind that they just, one thing leads to another, and man, it just invokes so much fear of the future into their lives. And so David Tucker mentions a couple here, finances, right? And I think that's something that many people who just living day to day and paycheck to paycheck and those kinds of things are like, man, if one thing goes wrong, this could possibly happen, or what if that happens, or David mentions health as well. So those two, in my opinion, sometimes tie together. Like, what if we have like a major health issue, and then we got to pay out of pocket for it, and that's not going to work here. He mentions politics. I think that's something we all agree on and see playing out in the world. It's like, man, that doesn't look good, and that could potentially lead to this, and that could potentially lead to that, and that doesn't look so good. Yeah, and so I just now scroll down and see, yeah, Fred Clayton mentions the stuff going on in Afghanistan, right? And you're like, oh man, that might have a long-term effect, and this might have an effect, and it might, do this over here. Colleen mentions job loss, right? And so you're always worried about that, and man, we can't handle that right now, and some people, we know some people that have just out of the blue over the last 18 months or so had that happen to them, or sickness. Yeah, Anita mentions that the death of a spouse, right? And one of those things you just sometimes you worry about, and what happens, or what would happen to me, or how would it be taken care of, or how would we meet these things if we didn't, if something were to happen to them. George mentions just general things you don't have control over. Those are things that stress a lot of people out, right? Things that no matter how much they think about it or stress about it, they just have no control over. It's like it's like somebody who's driving. Gabe's been studying for his permit test for a little bit, and he's gonna have a permit soon, and then a year a license, and I try to tell him, we want to prepare you as best we can, but we also worry about you because you may be as prepared as possible. You might be the best driver in the road. The problem is I can't control what the other people out on the road do, and so sometimes that worries you. Like, what I know that you might do the right things, and you might be safe, and you may not look at your phone. You may do this. You may do that. I just don't know what those other people are going to do. And so yeah, Amy mentions especially like what the future is going to look like for our children. And it's funny because I remember my parents had those exact same fears. I mean, I remember my parents saying it when I was a little kid. You know, their worries of our freedoms being taken away and what kind of future they're going to give to their kids, and I think that's a genuine, fear that every generation of parents has had, at least for the last couple generations. Going, man, what kind of country are we, um, you know, are we passing on to our kids? And so again, I don't ask these things, because I want you to dwell on them and beat yourself up and feel awful about these kinds of things. These are real things though that we all struggle with and wonder about, and what's going to happen in the future we don't know, and sometimes if we dwell on them too long it can cause too much fear. But again, like true stories like the Book of Ruth and stories like the Book of Esther, are reminders as we watch these things. And by the way, the Hards mentioned your parents were right. Yeah, and they had those concerns about like what are we going to give to our kids and what's that going to look like and those kinds of things. It's interesting. I think about something like the Book of Esther. I think back to our study through the Book of Habakkuk and how bad, even politically, both of those books had it, but God was still working out a plan that we didn't see and they didn't understand, and sometimes if you just look at just what's right in front of you, man, it can seem somewhat depressing. But that's not the point of the Book of Ruth. That's not the point of the Book of Esther. That's not the point of the book of Habakkuk. As a matter of fact, we're gonna focus, especially here in just a minute, on a completely different word, not fear. We're going to look at a completely different word here in just a minute. But let's read the first 10 verses, today, from Ruth chapter 1, Ruth chapter 4, verses 1 through 10. It says, "Then went Boaz up to the gate and sat him down there, and behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spake came by." So the more near kinsman than Boaz, right, that he mentioned before, comes by the gate. "Unto whom he said, Oh, such a one, turn aside, sit down here, and turn aside. And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, Sit ye down here. And they sat down. And said unto the kinsman, Naomi, that is come again out of the country of Moab, selleth a parcel of land, which was our brother Elimelech's." So hey, Naomi has this property. She's gonna sell it. One of us, it belongs in our state. It's in our family. And he said, "I thought to advertise it, saying, Buy it before the inhabitants and before the elders of my people. If thou wilt redeem it, redeem it. But if thou wilt not redeem it, then tell me that I may know. For there is none to redeem it besides thee, and I am after thee." And he said, "I will redeem it." So he tells the guy, he says, "Hey, you're first in line here to redeem this thing. If you want to redeem it, redeem it. If you don't, let me know, because I'll redeem it. I'm able to do it. I'm willing to do it. Let me know." Then said Boaz, and this is funny because he kind of held off this information for a minute. He says, "Then said Boaz, What day thou buyest the field of the hand of Naomi, thou must buy it also of Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance." So he tells him, hey, it's not just the land that you get, though. You also get Ruth. Ruth is part of the deal, right? And then verse 6, it says, "And the kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar mine own inheritance." He said, I think up to this point, the guy was rubbing his hands together going, yeah, some more land, some more property. And then he hears that Ruth is part of the deal, and he says, I can't do it. And we'll talk more about this in a second. He said, I mar my own inheritance. Redeem thou my right to thyself. Redeem thou my right to thyself, for I cannot redeem it. Now this was the manner in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and concerning changing, for to confirm all things. A man plucked off his shoe, and he gave it to his neighbor, and this was a testimony in Israel. Therefore the kinsman said unto Boaz, Buy it for thee. So he drew off his shoe. And Boaz said unto the elders and unto all the people, Ye are witnesses this day, that I have bought all that was Elimelech's, and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's of the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be cut off, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of his place ye are witnesses this day. So he jumps in here and he says, hey guys, you are my witnesses that I'm going to buy the land and I'm going to take Ruth to be my wife. The word that I don't want to focus on, I don't want to focus on fear of the future, but it's something we need to focus on and remember is part of who we are, is the word redemption. It's used over and over again. The word, he says, I'll redeem it. I'll redeem it. Will you redeem the land? You're not going to redeem the land. I'm going to redeem the land. Let me ask you this question. I've asked it a couple times throughout this book, but maybe in your own words, what does the word redemption mean? And you could even throw out a bunch of descriptive words or adjectives when you hear the word redemption. Uh, and that may be in its most technical sense, maybe in an applicable sense, in a spiritual sense, in a biblical sense. What comes to mind, or how would you define the word redemption? And I have a feeling you guys may have a lot of similar answers, but I'll wait for some of these to roll in because that is the word I want us to think of. I don't want us to focus on the fear of the future. I want us to take just a minute and to focus on this idea of redemption, right? You've heard it said, our redemption draweth nigh. The hearts chime in and say to buy back, right? I'm going to redeem that. I'm gonna buy that back. I'm gonna bring it back to myself, right? What else? I'm sure some of you have some other definitions or other additions to that. That is a correct definition of redemption, to buy back, and that's what he's actually going to do, because there was a potential that that land was going to be sold or was being mortgaged or something like that, and he's stepping in up to the plate and saying, I'm going to buy that back for our family. I'm going to keep that in our family. So Fred chimes in. It has the idea of collecting, right? I'm going to redeem that. So you hand something over to get something back. I'm going to redeem these coupons. Maybe sometimes you think about. Eric mentions the idea of saving from destruction, right? You think of redemption stories, that they were heading down the wrong path, or they're making mistakes, or things weren't going well for them, and they were heading down, and they were saved from that. It means to bring back from destruction. So Anita speaks to the idea of when you redeem a coupon, it's exchanging for something of value, and that's important for us to understand. And as a matter of fact, I'm even going to talk about that in our 9:30 class on Sunday. But yes, we're getting something back in value, and it's important for us to understand how much the Lord values the human soul. Colleen chimes in and says, buying back. Also when we think about redemption, talks about looking towards the future and covering the past, that the Lord has covered our past. So the idea, we get the idea of redemption means, has the idea of buying something back, saving something. It means to set free by paying a price, right? There was a price to be paid to free this thing from whatever it was caught up in. For Elimelech, again, Elimelech's property was going to be sold, or it was going to be mortgaged or something. And obviously we understand in Bible times, Elimelech had this property, and when he would die, it would naturally be passed down to his sons. Okay, but we know that his sons died, and that's why now Ruth was involved in all of this, right? Because Elimelech died, it got passed down to his sons, including her husband. He died, and so it now goes to his wife, to her, but she can't afford to pay it. She has no way to pay for this property and to keep it going. And really, this is a picture. We can see this picture of our bondage to sin, right? And we had this weight that was hanging over us, and we're unable to set ourselves free. There was no way for us to purchase our salvation from destruction. There's no way for us to make this right. So Christ paid a price that we couldn't pay. Just like Ruth could not pay it, we can't pay it. And just like Boaz steps in and pays a price that Ruth couldn't afford to pay, Christ steps in and pays a price that we cannot afford to pay. It's interesting that we were mentioning freedoms just a little bit ago, and this idea of losing freedoms, and I think that that's true. That in these little bits and pieces we have them taken away from us. Um, but we also live in a world of people, and especially in our country, even more than the world as a whole, we live in a world of people with loads of freedoms, like loads of them. And again, if you compare our country just to something like Afghanistan, um, we have loads of freedom. But what's amazing is even with all of our freedom, uh, we have loads of people, including Christians, that still live in bondage. We're free, but they're bound. They're bound by by drugs. They're bound by alcohol. They're bound by gambling. They're bound by sex. They're bound by work. I mean, we live with all these freedoms, but we're still bound to so many masters. Um, and Christ wants to come in, and he wants to set us free from all of those things. And so we see this picture begin to play out in the book of Ruth. So within this story, we and I'm going to ask you a question here in just a few minutes. I have a couple of them that come back to back in the end of this section here. But we talked last week a lot about the idea of the kinsman redeemer, right? We talked about the fact that a kinsman redeemer was a near kinsman, right? And in this situation, Boaz was a near kinsman, but he wasn't the nearest, right? And he found that out. I'm not the nearest, so we got to go ask this guy. The kinsman redeemer had to be able to pay the price, right? And this other kinsman was able to pay the price. Boaz had the ability to pay the price. Both of them could do it. There was a third one, though, that was really, really important. Not only did they need to be a near kinsman, and not only did they be able to pay the price, in this exchange, they had to be willing to pay the price. And the closer near kinsman had no desire to redeem that back. He had no desire, maybe for the property, but certainly not for Ruth. And so this gave Boaz an opportunity to jump in. Now, what we step into here is like, it doesn't make sense to us, right? Boaz goes to the city gate, gets a bunch of people together, and they kind of work it all out at the city gate. You have to understand that the city gate was like the official court where judicial business was transacted in these times. It was transacted amongst a bunch of, in the presence of a bunch of elders. Again, the other kinsman comes walking by. He was willing to pay for the land. Then he learns it includes Ruth. Ruth is part of it. And notice what he says. This is what's really interesting, okay? And I want us to talk for just a minute about some lessons here. I'm going to find it here. I'm going to bring it up to you. Here we go. He says these words. He says in verse 6, "And the kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar mine own inheritance." When he heard that Ruth was part of the transaction, that's when he backed out. And his explanation was, if I do this, I'm gonna jeopardize my own inheritance. In other words, what he was saying is, if I have a son by Ruth, right? If I give Ruth a son, and then that son was to be my only surviving heir, he says, he's like, that guy will get all of Mahlon's property, and he'd get like my estate too. He'd get it all. All of that would end up going to Elimelech's family. And so it's really interesting to me that this man tries to protect his name, and he tries to protect his inheritance, right? Oh no, I can't do that. I gotta protect my inheritance. I gotta protect my name. I can't do that. But here's the thing. Can I tell you something? Here's a guy who said, no, I can't do that. Gotta protect my name. Gotta protect my inheritance. And guess what? We have no idea who this guy is. Zero idea. There's no name. There's no mention of him. He was so worried about, I gotta bolster my name. I gotta bolster my inheritance. I can't let any of this, be put to shame. I gotta keep this in the family. I mean, we got an important name here. But guess what? Nobody knows what his name is. I have no clue what his name is. Don't know who he is. Don't know anything about his family. Nothing. We have no idea who he is. But can I tell you something? We know who Boaz and Ruth are. We know who they are. And so I want you to chew on that for a second. I just want to throw this out here. What are some lessons that we can learn from this? What are some takeaways from from some of the things that we just you know uh, had to do? So Eric asked, do you think it had to do with Ruth being a Moabite? A Moabitess. There's no doubt. I would say there's probably little doubt that because we notice that Boaz puts that in there, right? Ruth the Moabitess, um, and he throws that in there, and so it definitely can be like, and I can't bring that into my family. We can't, we can't do those things, um, and so that certainly may have had something to do with his hesitation there. But what are some things from this whole interaction that we see between Boaz and this guy and him wanting to protect his name and his inheritance and us having no idea who he is now, but knowing who Boaz and Ruth are. Um, what are just some maybe some reminders for all of us to consider or to take in as we read this and we see this play out um, here before us. Um, I'll wait just a minute and see, and then I have another question for you from verses 7 and 8 that we'll look at here in just a minute. But does anybody have any thoughts about it? Sometimes you guys are good at hopping in and sharing some good insight on those things, but um, and I only have one written down. It's not like I have a list. I'm going, all right, let's see these people and get what I don't have anything like that. I'm just wondering if anything comes to mind for you. Um, let's see here. Uh, yeah, so so I think so. Fred chimes in and says, yeah, he believes that the fact that Ruth was from Moab was a big, was a big deal, was a big problem, and again, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that was like, oh no no no, I can't, those are Moabites. I mean, those are some of our enemies. We can't be doing that kind of thing. One of the things that jumps out to me, because we have to understand, if it was a risk for this guy, um, it was a risk for for Boaz as well. So you have a couple people chime in here. Yeah, so one of the big things is he missed out on being an ancestor of the Messiah by thinking only financially, right? With this is making decisions with blinders on. Kristen chimes in and says, if we withhold something from being used for God's purposes, we likely lose it anyway. That's a great way to put it, Kristen. Right? I can't I can't do that. And we're protecting this thing that that we end up losing anyway. Eric mentions, hey, you can't take it with you. Always good to help someone when you can. The Claytons mentioned being careful about prejudice and all of those kinds of things. But and all of these things are true. But here we have Boaz who was willing to take a risk. He was willing to love. He was willing to obey. And as Terry mentions here, as the Hearts mention here, we see him end up playing a huge part in God's redemptive plan. Right? So he's here redeeming something, and all the while that is putting it's in the gears of God's plans to bring the ultimate redeemer, the redeemer of all redeemers, into the world. And to and so we see him bringing this to pass. And so I need to ask a question. Like, you can't take advantage of every opportunity, and we're even we learn to I can't say yes to everything, right? So how do you choose? And that's a valid question as well, right? Like, I can't jump on everything that comes my way. What's the right thing to do? What's the wrong thing to do? And I think a lot of that comes with lots of prayer and lots of seeking of counsel and lots of obviously obedience to God's word and following His leading. And I think about some common verses that we know that like Proverbs 3:5 and 6, and Psalm 34:5 that tells us to delight yourself also in the Lord, He shall give you the desires of the heart. I think that plays a huge part if I'm delighting myself in the Lord, and that is obeying Him, walking in the Spirit, being obedient to Him, and taking these steps. Unless he's putting up this giant stop sign, that you're just walking through these open doors that he provides for us until he does those things. That doesn't mean it's easy to do. There's no doubt about it. Um, you know, but Azariah mentions to always have God's mindset, even when situations may be inconvenient. And so, yeah, the Claytons chime in as well that it's a reminder. It's a reminder that God looks at different things than we do, and He has bigger plans than we do. And so here's Boaz. He steps up to the plate. He takes this risk. It becomes part of God's plan. And in verse 7 and in verse 8, this is kind of how it tells us it goes down. It's really interesting. It says, now this was the manner in former time in Israel concerning the redeeming and concerning changing for to confirm all things. And it says, a man plucked off his shoe and gave it to his neighbor, and this was a testimony to Israel. It says also, and I'm going to see if I can find it here. In verse 8, it says, therefore the kinsman said unto Boaz, buy it for thee. So he drew off his shoe. It's kind of a funny situation here. The Bible tells us that, hey, this is the way it used to be. A man would pluck off his shoe and give it to his neighbor. And so the Bible says that's what he did. This man then takes off his shoe and he gives it to Boaz. Why do you think? So here's a question I want you to think about, and I bet you've thought about it long enough you could probably get it. Why do you think that's the way they did it? What's the significance of what's the significance, and why a shoe, right? Like, why was it like they didn't just do things for no reason? Why was it that the way they kind of sealed these deals was for a man to take off his shoe and give it to this person? And he says, I'm not going to redeem that. You can redeem that. Here are my shoes, right? So we have a couple people jumping in here. It says it's hard to run away. Okay, it's true. You can't you can't escape it at this point. So that may be that may be one of the reasons why that it's used there. I don't believe that is, but I can see what you're aiming for here as well. So think about that for a second, and think about. I'll even give you a hint. Think about how in Bible times people were called to take possession of a land, and I think even in the early days of places like America, right? How somebody claimed a piece of property for themselves, right? How does somebody take a piece of property for themselves? And so, well, that's Fred Clayton mentions being barefoot in the desert wouldn't be something taken lightly. That's for sure. Yep. And so it's kind of this idea that we mean business. But in Bible times, and even from my understanding, in some of the staking your claim out west, you had to walk on that property. As a matter of fact, you were commanded to walk on the land in Bible times in order to take possession of it, right? And so again, exactly. So Eric is now kind of chiming in here with it as well. They had to walk the land to claim it, and Terry's mentioned that as well. So you had to walk on a land in order to claim it for something for yourself. So this idea of him taking his shoes off and giving them to Boaz is a symbol of him. He's forfeiting his right to possess the land. He's taking his shoes off and giving them to Boaz as a forfeiture. I'm not going to walk the land. These are you can walk the land. I'm forfeiting that to you. I'm not going to walk the land in order to claim it. You can go walk on Elimelech's land and claim it for yourself. I'm forfeiting that to you. But here's the awesome thing. Just like Jesus, Boaz's major concern was not his own inheritance. As a matter of fact, we see very clearly that Boaz wanted to share his inheritance. And again, for me, it's really interesting. I wasn't anticipating this, but it's really interesting to be reading through Romans chapter 8 and reading Ruth at the same time and see so many of these things come together. Because in Romans chapter 8, we talk about being adopted into God's family, and that we're also we're joint heirs. We're inheritors of we're inheritors of God's riches and God's kingdom. We're co-heirs together with Christ to see these things. And again, Jesus wasn't sitting in heaven going, "This is my kingdom, and this is my stuff, and these are my people, and I don't want to share them with anybody. This is mine. This is mine, mine, mine." I remember a book when my kids were growing up called The Minosaur, about a dinosaur that didn't want to share any of his toys with anybody. It was mine, and that was his thing he said over and over again: "Mine, mine, 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 mine." That's not how Jesus looks at his inheritance. He says, "I want to," and Boaz either. I want to share my inheritance. I want other people to take part in this. Okay. Now, in verses 11 through 12, and we're almost done because we're going to save. We're going to look really quickly at verses 13 through 22 in just a minute, but we're going to save 13 through 22 for next week when we finish out Ruth chapter 4. But verses 11 through 12 say this. It says, "And all the people that were in the gate and the elders said, 'We are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that has come into thine house like Rachel and like Leah.'" In other words, what they're saying is, we want you to have lots of kids. Boaz and Ruth, we want you to be fruitful and multiply. It says, which two did build the house of Israel, and do thou worthily in Ephratah, and be famous, and be famous in it, and let thy house be like the house of Pharez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord give thee of this young woman." So here are these people that see it all happen, and they're excited, right? Yes, we love this, and we hope you guys are. I hope you guys multiply, and you're a blessing to Israel, just like Rachel and Leah are, and it's wonderful. And by the way, little did these people know that through this union, God would bring the Messiah to the earth. But here they are hoping for many children for Ruth and Boaz. But one of the things that's really interesting, notice what they say here. It says, "And do thou worthily in Ephratah," okay, and do thou worthily in Ephratah. Now, we know of messianic prophecies that tell us that the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem, Ephratah. Right? We see that. Does anybody know? Here's the question: does anybody know what the name Ephratah means? Anybody know what that means? I'll wait for just a second, see if anybody knows what it means. What does the word Ephratah mean? I guess if you have a study Bible there and it tells you, you can look it up. But if you look and see if anybody just happens to know it by heart, what the word Ephratah means. I'll wait. I know somebody will get it. Even if they don't know it off the top of their head, they might look it up. But somebody will get it. He'll be the first one to chime in and tell us what Ephratah means. Because I think it's really interesting. I think it's important that of all the places, here are these people in Bethlehem, Ephratah, telling them, "We want you to have lots of kids." So Terry Cross chimes in. It means fruitful. It means to be fruitful. So here they are in Bethlehem, Ephratah, and they're saying, in the place that is known as fruitful, we want you to be fruitful. And because of their fruitfulness, right? Because of their fruitfulness, this is the place where Christ is born. And it's just kind of a neat thing for them to say, "Hey, we hope you have lots of children in this place. We hope you're like Bethlehem, Ephratah. We hope you're like fruitful." And by the way, we know that the idea of Bethlehem, the house of bread, and this idea of being fruitful. This is where Jesus Christ comes into the world, and it happens down the line from Ruth and Boaz, which is really neat to see. Now let's read really quickly verses 13 through 22. I'm gonna share just a couple thoughts, and we'll be done. Okay, it says this. It says, So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife, and when he went in unto her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. And the woman said unto Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, which hath not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name be famous in Israel. Right? Naomi, you're going to have a kinsman. Here he is, this little boy we're going to have. And the Bible says, and she shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life. This little baby is going to restore life to you, Naomi, and a nourisher of thine old age, for thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him. And Naomi took the child and laid it in her bosom and became nurse unto it. And the woman, her neighbors gave it a name, saying, There is a son born to Naomi. And they called his name Obed. And he is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generation of Pharez. Pharez begot Hezron, and Hezron begot Ram, and Ram begot Amminadab, and Amminadab begot Nahshon, and Nahshon begot Salmon, and Salmon begot Boaz, and Boaz begot Obed, and Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David. And so again, we're gonna look at this last couple verses next week, and we're really gonna focus on Obed and how Obed, this one child, was used of God in a great way. God had been, but before we finish tonight, I want us to think about God's grace to Ruth. God was gracious to her back in Moab. She was faithful. She trusted Him. His grace continued as she moved to Bethlehem. God guided her through the fields of Boaz, guided her to Boaz, and Boaz falls in love with her. God's grace continues to the gates of the city, where the near kinsman rejects Ruth, and Boaz instead purchases her along with the land. After they're married, God pours out His grace on Ruth and Boaz again by giving her conception, and then by giving her the safe delivery of a son whose name is Obed. Okay. And I don't have it up here, but I'm going to ask one more time if anybody knows. Does anybody know what the name Obed means? Anybody know what the name Obed means? Anybody know? Anybody know? Obed. So when you think about it, so you have Ruth and Boaz. They have a son named Obed. That's their son. Obed has a son named Jesse, so that's their grandson. And they have a son named David, so that is Ruth and Boaz's great-great-grandson. So Colleen chimes in, one who serves. Yeah, has the name Obed has the idea of one that's a servant or one that serves. And we're going to see next week how this, through all of this trial, all of these hardships, all of these things, God's grace is bestowed upon Ruth. She has a baby who becomes a servant. And what we're going to see is as he fulfills his name as one who serves and servant, God uses this baby, even as a baby, to be a source of blessing to many people. We're going to see next week how he's a blessing to Boaz and Ruth, and he's a blessing to Naomi, and he's a blessing to future generations of people as we look at chapter 13 through 22. But just this little baby who will have a baby named Jesse, will have a baby named David, who down the road, will have a baby, whose name is Jesus. It's a blessing. Who comes to serve, right? The Bible tells us, Philippians chapter 2, he took on the form of a servant and was a blessing to many people. Even through all of the hardship and all the difficulties and all of the pain, God's grace is still evident in a mighty, mighty way. And we'll take one last look at it next week and see how that plays out. Before we're done here, I'm going to go back up because I wasn't ignoring it, but we had already jumped in here. Amy asked a question a long time ago, a joke, so we'll jump in, Amy. Why did the cookie go to the doctor? Anybody want to answer that one? Why did the cookie go to the doctor? A bonus joke of the day at the end here, because I saw it there, but we had moved on to the Book of Ruth, so I didn't want to miss it. But I'll give somebody a chance to answer it. Why did the cookie go to the doctor? Anybody? 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 Going once, going twice. All right, Amy, you might have to give us the answer. Nobody else is willing to answer. George says he can't answer. I don't know what the answer is. Anybody? You got like 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Oh, okay. It's got to be it. Terry Michelle chime in and say, because he's feeling crummy. That's a good one. Yes, because he's feeling crummy. Good job. Late in the night on a... Yes. It has to be it, because he's feeling... Is that right, Amy? Is that correct? Because he's feeling crummy? Good job. Good job. Good job. Way to go, Hearts. Glad you guys got that one. So thanks for chiming in here. Hope you guys have a good rest of the week, rest of the evening, and that you experience the wonderful grace of God even through difficult times as well. And look forward to joining back with you one more time next week. And credit to Michelle. Good job, Michelle. And so one more time next week here online. And then we'll have some updates and details for you about how we'll do midweek stuff going forward. And hope you guys have a great rest of the week, and we will talk to you later.